Jodi, thank you for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we're here in Banff for the 2023 meetings of the Prairie Grain Development Committee.
Mm-hmm.
What brings you to PGDC this year?
PGDC is always a meeting that's on my list. It's where our varieties get nominated for registration. But besides just that, it's where all of the people in our industry, everybody makes this meeting a priority and comes. And so it's a great networking meeting and great to see everybody and have discussions on the next year and make collaborations and just get caught up on everybody's lives. So it's great. It's a great meeting to attend.
Now, you are one of our top 10 Next-Gen Leaders for 2023. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks for picking me. That's great.
Now, I haven't caught up with you in a few years. It's been a little while since the last time I interviewed you, and I believe last time I interviewed you, you had just received the Nuffield Scholarship.
Right.
Congratulations again.
Oh, thank you.
Now, you were planning to study, and I'm going to read this here because it's a mouthful, the progress and limitations surrounding crop development in varying political environments. You set out to gain insight into opportunities enabled by the Plant Breeders' Rights Act, and you hoped to promote innovations in the development of cutting-edge varieties to enable farmers to be more competitive in the global market. What was your biggest takeaway from that?
Yeah, well, it kind of morphed as we went along. So it really was looking at the opportunities and obstacles for private plant breeding in the end. We see the small independent, the startup, the family plant breeding companies really having obstacles in Canada, and how we can overcome those obstacles and how we can fill this fourth lane of plant breeding for Western Canadian farmers and for Canadian farmers to really add another level of innovation and better varieties, hopefully, and hedging the bets of the industry and making sure there's multiple players that are working towards improving these varieties for Canadian farmers. It was a fantastic opportunity that I got. I got to travel the world and go to places where people like me exist in large numbers, and the industry thrives with them in those spaces. So I think looking back, there's quite a few little obstacles that added together make for quite a big obstacle for someone like me or like Jim Dick without Advantage or other people that want to start up private plant breeding. It makes it a little bit harder in Western Canada. And so there's a few policy areas that we can try to change or have written with the opportunity of having people like us exist. But I think the big thing is just perception still. For us in Western Canada, the thought of private plant breeding still kind of conjures up the idea of this big, bad, greedy company, whereas I think the people that are technically or more likely being blocked are the startups, the homegrown plant breeders, the people that just want to breed plants in kind of a different environment than what we have available here right now. So hopefully through time, we can show that other opportunities exist and move forward there. But Nuffield was a great opportunity. It was so cool going and seeing small startups or startups that started 10, 20 years ago and watching them thrive and seeing the cool innovation they're bringing to their country's farmers and discussing with them and just getting so motivated. It was a really cool opportunity, and I'm very thankful to the Nuffield organization for allowing me to do my study. Although during the pandemic, it was a little tough, but we still made it happen.
Yeah, that would be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah.
Speaking of startups, you have your own startup, J4 Agri-Science.
Yeah.
And you told me back in 2020, and I quote, "The focus of my company is looking at crops that might not have a foothold in Western Canada and using any and all technologies possible to take them to the next level without worrying about established norms like public sector versus private sector. I just want to get the job done." End quote. Now, here we are 3 years after we did that interview. What's the biggest stride you feel you've made in that regard since then?
Yeah, so plant breeding is a long game. We know that it takes a long time from first cross to commercialization, but we're moving forward quite quickly, and are actually probably ahead of where I thought we would be 3 years ago. So it's kind of exciting, these meetings, because I should be in the next couple of years putting in my own lines for registration. So that's cool. I think it's the same kind of thought process. I come from a farm. I come from a farming background. I still sit on the combine every year. I still sit on the seeder every year. And for me as a farmer, it doesn't matter if the variety was bred publicly or privately. I just want a variety that suits my farm, that we can grow. So I think it's still kind of the same premise. It shouldn't matter. It's, the variety should compete against each other no matter where they come from. And I think there's a huge opportunity in Canada because of our really talented public space for public-private partnerships, and really making sure we have the right people working on the right traits and the right objectives, and depending on the puzzle of that trait and objective, making sure we have the right team in place. And it's not one you versus me, it's not them versus us. And we see that in other countries over the Nuffield too. We can work together. So I think that's still the same as 3 years ago, identifying gaps where I think farmers can benefit from, and we're just breeding for our own people, right? For our farm and for our neighbors and for our friends and for their farms. And I think that mindset will hopefully lead us to be successful. If you ask me the same question 10 years from now, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and being here at PGDC must be really great for you to be interacting with public sector, private sector, all these different people involved. But what I'm hearing from you is that, we need to open up our playing field to people like you, breeders like you, who sort of want to, break free of this traditional model, like you say, of private sector and public sector, and just kind of operate independently and be able to innovate. And a big theme this year at the meeting, as we'll find out in the plenary session tomorrow, is the regulatory system. Mm-hmm. Before I let you go, what's the biggest regulatory hurdle you think we need to get over in order to enable more people like you to really thrive in this industry?
Yeah, and I think there's a few. I wouldn't say it's just one. I think there's a few that are going to need to line up for a really successful small independent private lane. It is a really hard industry to break into for several reasons. And one of them is the time it takes to register varieties. So that's probably what we'll hear tomorrow. But, if you're a startup and you have to wait another 3 years, that could be the end of your startup. And I always say as farmers too, that could be, if there's a new disease resistance trait that comes out and farmers have to wait 3 years, that's a lot of lost economic potential. So we should hopefully allow the farmers a little bit more of the opportunity to select what risk they're comfortable with. But that's a big one. And then royalty collection is always going to be big for private companies in these inbred crops. We just need a way to be able to continue to have our revenues returned to be innovative. The goal is not, to have one variety and fail because we can't create the next variety. The goal is to be here in 35 years and you be interviewing me and talking about the last 35 years, right? So in order to have that, we need to have some way to keep our programs running. And so those two are pretty big. Biotechnology is always a concern, that there's countries that have an easier ability to use some techniques that we're still kind of having in a gray area. So yeah, between those three, I think hopefully we can kind of write that policy or think about it more so from newcomers and not just, the mainstay academic or government breeding programs that exist, but how can we write those pieces of policy to help new people come in? Because we have such a space for competition right now. We're Western Canadian agriculture. When these crops in the UK, which is so small acreage in comparison, have 4 or 5 breeders when Canada has 1 or maybe 2, and over such a broad area, it's a risk for the industry. So making sure that we can get enough players in that we hedge the farmers' bets, and there's always some varieties coming out that are innovative and cutting edge and raising the bar, because we're competing globally, right? So we have to keep up with Australia and the States and Brazil, where they don't have the hurdles we have. So
yeah, it's definitely not simple, but
no.
I look forward to our interview 35 years from now.
I hope we do one 35 years from now.
Talk about how successful we've been. So.
It's going to be an interesting road. It's such a fun area. Like, my job is so cool. Like, I don't know if I sound lame saying that, but like, we're solving these puzzles. We're creating, like, we're brainstorming and seeing how we can create these things, and then putting them out on farms and watching them benefit agriculture. Like, we have the best job in the world if we're allowed to stay and exist, I guess. So it's really cool.
Yeah, it's a fun profession to be in.
Yeah, it's a cool profession to be in.
Look forward to seeing your progress in the next few years. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for honoring me again with the Next Gen.
Not a problem. Thanks for taking part.
Thanks.